Well, hello, everyone. I'm Jill Bloom, Group Publisher of Roofing Contractor, and thank you for joining me for a special episode of the Best of Success podcast show. And always honored to be joined by Trent Cotney, partner with Adams and Reese. Trent, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jill. It's always a pleasure.
Well, before we got on, it's no doubt we have a big topic to talk about, and the lack of qualified, skilled labor. So I'm just going to tee it up for you, Trent. What does everybody need to understand and what's happening? There's some changes and things just happening.
Yeah, so it's real strange, John. It's hit me really hard like a brick, over the last few weeks, and just taking calls and talking to contractors, going to meetings. And I remember 25 years ago, the use of sub labor was, I wouldn't say non-existent, but you didn't see as much, right? It just wasn't that way. And I think over the years, the percentage that, especially on the residential side, that contractors have been using sub labor has increased dramatically. Now, I would say in the last 3 or 4 years, it's prolific, right? And I'd venture to say that probably 80-90% of the residential market out there uses some kind of sub labor.
That's a huge number.
Yeah, I'd say probably 50-60% of commercial. And it's a sign of the times. We cannot find, skilled labor to perform these jobs. So we can look at a variety of things. We can look at, trying to get other groups into our industry, whether it be women through things like National Women in Roofing, or it be, people coming out of high school through VOTEC or whatever it might be. We can look towards immigration. We are always talking about immigration favorable policies and, trying to mold those. Obviously, it's a political hot topic. So kind of figuring out the best way to do that to ensure that we've got a legal workforce. Technology. We've talked about technology in past podcasts about how, we're seeing a variety of things, everything from software advancements to automation, robots that can remove shingles and all kinds of things. So, but the biggest issue right now is that there isn't anybody to do the work. So people are having to turn to sub labor, to subcontractors to perform this work. And it's just shocking to me how rapidly it has increased over the last few years.
Well, you mentioned something about there's some states that are rolling back some laws in regards to allowing teens and child labor, changing child labor laws. What's that all about?
Yeah, so recently there's been a handful of states, Iowa and Arkansas and others, that are looking to not completely eliminate child labor laws, but definitely allow teenagers, we're talking 16 and above, to work longer hours, to not have to necessarily comply with the standards that were in place. What's interesting there is that there's some back and forth between the federal dynamic, which has very strict guidelines, and these states that are looking to curtail them a little bit. And part of that is in construction, we need everybody that can lift a hammer at this point. So you and I were talking before this started, we were used to working those kind of hours. So I think that there's probably a happy medium there, but definitely it's just yet another sign of the times that we're looking for anyone, and not just in construction. There's agricultural, there's hospitality, you name it. Everybody needs workers, and it's become, especially after COVID. I think we saw a lot of the workforce leave, and I think we're still having trouble recuperating from that. So I would anticipate that you're going to see more of these types of laws kind of go into effect, or at least a rollback of some existing laws in order to allow more people to get into the workforce.
So, question for you, Trent: if I'm a contractor, whether it's walls and ceilings or a roofing contractor, and I'm using subs, what's the best way to protect myself so I know? Because I'm not training those guys; they're just showing up kind of from somebody else who's somebody else's training them. How do I know that they've got the right skills to do exactly what we need to get done?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because and I always say this, Jill, if the contractors that are listening to this did everything I told them to do, they'd be out of business, and I kind of recognize that. But when you're using sub labor, there's a variety of things that you want to check into, right? If you're in a state that requires your subs to be licensed to perform certain types of work, you gotta, that's a box that needs to be checked, right? Are you looking for insurance? Do they have workers' comp? Do they have CGL, right? Or, commercial general liability? What does their workforce look like? Do you know that, do you have a good master subcontract agreement? Do you know that who's going to be on that job? Right. And knowing all this is incredibly important. But Jill, you hit on the key thing, and that is, happy customer, happy contractor. You got to make sure that the quality is there. And in order to ensure that these sub labor crews are doing well, obviously you go based on word of mouth, but you've got to have a good superintendent, a good project manager that is within your company, making sure they go out there and inspect the work on a daily basis. Don't wait till the project's complete. Go out there, inspect the work, make sure it meets your criteria. And that way you're sort of double checking and, trust but verify kind of thing. So it's a delicate subject, and it's fraught with legal peril, right?
Mhm.
There's issues about classification that we've talked about before. There's issues with, I-9s and legality of citizenship. There's issues with OSHA and employment and all these other things. But regardless of all that, it's here to stay, right? Until technology or something else eliminates the need for that level of labor, it's something that we're just having to deal with.
So what's the hope? What's the nugget? What's the takeaway? I mean, everyone's
Yeah,
using
the takeaway is that successful roofing contractors now are learning how to shift and evolve their business, right? And look, there are many roofing contractors out there that do 100% of their own labor. Don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that by any means, but definitely in the residential space, a huge percentage sub out that labor, right? So the way that you do work is changing, and the quality control needs to change. The standard operating procedures need to change. And I think in those states where you can use subs, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's got this bad connotation, but the way to grow is you add on more labor, right? How do you add on more labor? Well, you got to look to subs sometimes. So I think the nugget that I would take away is, yes, I understand it's part of the industry now, but make sure you've got good controls in place. Have your admin team have a subcontractor checklist in advance, so they know they are getting a signed copy of that master subcontract agreement, which has everything in it, copies of the insurance, licensure if it's needed, all the boxes that need to be checked in advance of that crew starting. And if you follow those procedures, you're going to mitigate your risk.
So when you're talking about that subcontractor agreement, what are the top two things that everybody should make sure that is in that subcontractor agreement?
Yeah. So the way that I like to do it, Jill, and there's 4 or 5 different ways you can do it, but the way I like to do it is I create a master subcontract agreement. It's very lengthy and it's very onerous, right? Very one-sided in favor of the prime, roofing contractor or walls and ceilings contractor. And it has all the bells and whistles in it, right? It's got a page and a half of safety stuff that protects you, that helps protect you on the OSHA side. It's got indemnification. It's got all these great provisions in it. The subcontractor signs that once, and then you put it away. From that point forward, every project that sub does for you, they sign a 1-page proposal that has scope and price and refers back to that MSA. Okay. So the key here is you make it as painless as possible. I prefer DocuSign, because half the time I know when I'm going through DocuSign, rarely am I reading stuff. I'm just clicking on buttons. So you get that MSA that first time, have that thing signed, you file that away. And from that point forward, you're just using 1-page proposals to talk about, project location, scope, price. And at the bottom, it says governed by the terms and conditions of the master subcontract agreement. So if you've got that, it gets you a good starting point. Is it the magic fairy dust that will get you out of jail for free? Now it's not going to happen. But if you don't have that, you're going to be a lot worse off. So definitely start there.
Great advice. So let me ask another question. You mentioned I-9s earlier. There was a time several years ago that all of a sudden several contractors were getting just hit with an I-9 raid. Are you still seeing that? Is that something contractors need to be prepared for? And if they're not, what should they have in place?
Yeah, absolutely. So you raised a bunch of different topics there. And first thing I want to say is that an employer only has responsibility to ensure that their employees are properly documented, and you have to fill out I-9s for employees. So if they are a proper subcontractor, that you are not responsible for their I-9s, they are responsible for it. Okay, but
But,
If-
oh no,
if-
there's
right,
always but.
right, if for some reason you misclassified that subcontractor, so if that sub only works for you, they don't work for anybody else, they wear your gear, they don't market, they don't advertise, and they really should be your employees, then you could be in a position where you're liable for failure to obtain I-9s. So one of the things we talked about a few weeks ago, Jill, is that, many states are turning towards E-Verify. Here in the state of Florida, there's sort of a panic that's going around because July 1, 25 employees or more, and you're a private company, you're going to have to E-Verify. So that is a database where you submit the information on there, and it gives you a yes or no as far as, is this person legal? So it's a lot more accurate than having your employees submit documentation. Yes, I'm absolutely seeing ICE audits continue to happen. ICE raids continue to happen. I will say it ebbs and flows depending on the administration. You're gonna, depending on what the politics are at the time, you may see more audits, you may see less audits. But regardless, it is still an ongoing issue, and it's something that contractors should be aware of.
Yes, that's we've all heard those stories. It's a scary moment.
Right.
Well, Trent, thank you so much for that insight. It's always great to talk to you because you got great nuggets for all contractors listening. And if anybody has any questions, where can they reach you?
Sure, they can hit me up at trent.cotney@arlaw.com.
Sounds great. And if anybody has any questions for us, it's roofingcontractor.com, wconline.com, or roofingsupplypro.com. And while you're there, make sure you sign up for all our free content, especially our e-newsletters, our website, our webinars. That way you can stay up to date on all our great interviews we're doing, like we are today with Trent. But most importantly, stay safe and healthy, and we can't wait to talk to you soon. Thanks again, Trent.
Thank you.